All right, now I'd like to bring the regular afternoon meeting of Township Langley Council to order. And the first item on the agenda is the adoption and receipt of the agenda items. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Arneson and Councillor Qualley seconds. All those in favor? Opposed and carried. Next item is adoption of minutes, a regular afternoon council meeting of March the 6th. Councillor Fox, second by Councillor Qualley. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed and carried. And now a motion to resolve into special closed. Can I have a motion, please?
Moved.
Councillor Qualley, second by Councillor Whitmarsh. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I'd like to add an intergovernmental, please.
Intergov. Okay.
And I also had a question with regards to one of the items on the in-camera agenda. I guess I have to bring that up in camera, do I?
Yeah.
I just don't understand why it's in camera.
Okay, thank you. That's fine. So with that, I see nothing else. There is no on-table items, so there are no. Okay, so all those in favor? Opposed and carried. Now move into special close. Thank you.
We got to get them.
Okay. We'll get rolling again. So we can have Councillor Davis. Okay. All right. Now I'd like to reconvene the regular afternoon meeting of Township of Langley Council, and the next item on the agenda is the BC Bi-Regional Food System Design Project, and there will be a presentation by Dr. Mullinex. Please come forward. Welcome here.
Bring this up. There it is. Is that it? I've never started a PowerPoint in front of the mayor and council before. Mayor and council, I'm really honored to be here, and I appreciate the invitation. And I'm going to very briefly tell you about the outcome of this study that we've conducted. But before I do, I want to express my sincere gratitude to the Township of Langley for the township's support and endorsement and funding of this project, and to note that Mayor Froese was the only mayor that actually contacted us years ago when this study started and asked us to come speak to him and about what we were going to do, and then subsequently supported the project, and that support was pivotal in our garnering other support from other municipal governments. And so I do sincerely thank you, Mayor and Council. So let me talk a little bit about the project background. As you know, the viability and sustainability of our food system is routinely called into question, and concerns are raised. And without a doubt, we all recognize that our sustainable future will require a sustainable food system. And part of the discourse around sustainable food systems is the potential of localizing or regionalizing it. And but there's very little information about what would happen if, or what the outcomes might be if we did indeed substantially move from a commodity-focused food system to a more regionalized or localized food system. And so on both sides of the discussion, there's just very little information. So it was the purpose of this study was actually to bring data-driven information to the discussion of local food system potentials. So our objectives specifically were to develop a methodology for assessing the potential of regionalized food systems and then applying that methodology to the Southwest British Columbia bioregion. And what we wanted to do was to specifically assess the potential to increase food production here for local markets, and determine, if we did so, how might that improve food self-reliance, and how might it benefit our economy, create jobs, and address key environmental concerns. The study area was southwest British Columbia, the bioregion of southwest British Columbia, and we focused on the bioregion because we think that the food system and the food system economy needs to be approached at that scale. The project was ultimately supported by 23 municipal and regional district governments, 9 with funding, including the Township of Langley. Additionally, 19 community and government organizations endorsed the project. And the project, in addition to the modest funding that the 9 municipalities provided, was largely funded by 4 foundations, nonprofit foundations, including the Real Estate Foundation of BC, Van City, the Vancouver Foundation, and the Webster Foundation out of Montreal. Moving to methodology, what we did in a nutshell is develop what we call an optimization model, a computational model to compare potential food system futures to the contemporary food system. And what this enables us to do, this model enables us to do, is what we call what-if analysis. What if the population is this size? What if the land base is this size? What if we produce these crops versus those crops? So what-if analysis. And using this computational model, we explored food system futures. It's important to point out that the model outcomes are not predictive. They are exploratory. And it's super important to note that. So we modeled literally dozens of scenarios, actually nearly 100 scenarios, and to answer these questions. What if we continued with a business as usual approach, that is growing the same crops and producing the same farm products that we're doing now on the same land base, versus what if we prioritize production of food to meet the local food demand? What if we did that and tried to mitigate some pressing environmental concerns by implementing environmental enhancements, specifically the imposition of hedgerows along all boundaries for wildlife habitat, the imposition of riparian buffers along all waterways, and invoking a balance between the nitrogen produced in animal livestock manure and that which is required for crops. I don't know if you all are aware of this, but in many of the regions, agriculture areas, there is a environmentally detrimental excess of nitrogen from animal manure that contaminates our water supplies. And somehow we need to bring this into balance. And crops demand nitrogen, so it seems that's an appropriate place. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. If I need to repeat anything, please let me know. So we measured, we generated these scenarios of these different food. And the last food system future was what if we did focus the production on satisfying local demand and mitigated some environmental concerns and expanded production onto all of the available ALR land. And we measured these scenario outcomes against 15 indicators. 7 were economic indicators, 7 were ecological indicators, and the 15th was food production, food self-reliance. So all the future scenarios were evaluated against this suite of indicators. So, in essence, in a nutshell, in the year 2050, when our population increases by the expected 60% in Southwest BC, achieving levels of nearly 4.3 million people, and given that no farm practices changed from 2011, no new technologies, we're producing crops the same and stock the same way we do now, and the land either stays the same or increases to about 125,000 hectares. We looked at all these indicators. So in terms of food self-reliance in 2050, if we had the same crop mix and livestock mix that we're producing today, food and the population increases, and we're farming the same amount of land that we farm today, our food self-reliance will plummet from 40% today to 28%. And I should note that that 40% today is really a hypothetical level of food self-reliance. The fact of the matter is, we don't know how much food grown locally is sold and consumed locally. Nobody knows that. So this 40% is a theoretical best level of food self-reliance today. But in 2050, when our population increases 60%, if we don't do things differently, our food self-reliance will plummet to 28%. I also want to note that the 40% food self-reliance that we hypothetically enjoy today is entirely dependent upon the import of grain feed for livestock. And if we were to cease the importation of grain feed for livestock, our food self-reliance will plummet to 12%. And so our future food system and levels of food self-reliance are really dependent and will continue to be dependent on the importation of livestock feed. If the production mix changes and we start growing crops and producing livestock to meet local food need, we could increase our food self-reliance in 2050 from 40% to 56% just farming the same land base that we're farming now. And if we implement some of the environmental enhancements that we spoke of, riparian buffers and hedgerows, and impose the nitrogen balance, our food self-reliance levels will decrease a little bit to 49% because we're taking land out of production. And the nitrogen balance then limits crop production, livestock production and crop production. But in 2050, with the increase in population by 60%, if we can get the ALR land into production, we can actually impose these environmental enhancements and increase our bioregional food self-reliance from 40% to 57%. So we can do a better job and steward the environment. And economically, very important, if the same crop and livestock mix is produced in 2050 as is produced today, the economic impact won't change much. That makes sense. We're not doing anything different, and if all other things equal, not much is going to change. The same economic contribution to our that we enjoy now is going to be experienced in 2050. But because our population increases, we are going to have to import even more food. And the value of imports in 2060 will increase 82%. And this represents from $1.8 billion today to $2.9 billion in 2050. And this represents what we call economic leakage. We will be giving $2.9 billion away by not developing the local sector. But if the production mix changes according to local food need, the economic impact will increase. And I want you to know that we generated this data using the province's input-output model, which is a standard tool of economists. So we didn't make this up. We used the provincial economic analysis and forecasting, or not forecasting tool, analysis tool. So if we change the crop mix and focus on the local markets, farming the same amount of land in 2050, we can increase the economic benefit to our communities by 50% over today. It will increase by 30% if we impose the environmental enhancements we talked about, again, because we're taking land out of production, but we're creating a habitat for wildlife and riparian buffers and the nitrogen balance. But if we expand local production for local markets on all of the available ALR land, we can increase every economic indicator: job creation, income generation, money in people's pockets, business creation, gross domestic product generation, total economic outcome generation, and tax revenues to all three levels of government by nearly 100%. And that's the power of regionalizing a food system in terms of economic development. And I should add that the input-output model takes into account, when calculating economic gain, it takes into account the economic loss from the diminution of the existing sector. So the bottom line is the money is in localizing, regionalizing the food system. Job creation is in localizing, regionalizing the food system. Business creation is in localizing, regionalizing the food system. Increasing tax revenues is in localizing and regionalizing the food system. But key to this is not agriculture production per se. It is advancing the total food system. And in fact, much of the value of the food system resides in the post-production sector. Processing, aggregating, processing, storing, distributing, and retailing. And so the key to realizing these economic benefits is twofold: creating a policy and regulatory environment that supports this kind of community-focused, smaller-scale agriculture, concomitant with the development of the requisite businesses to support that food system, to be that food system. So all of the documentation, all of the data, all of the findings from this study, this 4-year study, are available on the Institute for Sustainable Food Systems website, and it is available to municipal governments and community members and citizens and anybody gratis. And with that, I conclude.
Well, thank you very much for that. Very interesting presentation. I've got a couple questions, and it's interesting, the statistics. I know we're going to have a hard time ever growing bananas and oranges and that sort of thing, and coffee. We're going to continue to import, and as population grows, that percentage of that dollars will grow too in imports, and the Lower Mainland here, there's a lot. We do a lot of export, where we export blueberries, cranberries, horticulture, even greenhouse vegetables are exported right down the whole Pacific coast into California, which is kind of odd because we import a lot. So there's always some of that. So we don't, and the grains, feed grains, we can't grow here. We have to import. So there's always going to be some of that. So did the study look at how, we talk about that we'll be importing so much more food, but did it also examine how we could expand our exports? Because we do know we have to import, but if our trade deficit, I guess, so to speak, on importing and exporting, because we do a lot of exports. So how does that fit into this?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, Mayor Froese. We didn't look at what an appropriate balance was. We were looking at what the economic and food production potential were for regionalizing a food system. We do believe that a local regional food system must and will occur in balance with an appropriate commodity export-focused food system, but and for what it's worth, you're quite right. Under the best of circumstances, the highest level of food self-reliance, based on what we eat when we eat it, is about 75%, and so we're going to be importing 25% of our food no matter what. because I'm sure you all will join me in not giving up coffee or tea or bananas and those sorts of things. And even with substitution of locally produced fruits and vegetables with import, it's not going to change that dynamic very much. So an appropriate balance needs to be, we need to recognize that. It's part of our economy. But what this study really demonstrates is that if we want to engage in the most substantive economic development, than it is in the development of a local regional food system, as opposed to a commodity-based export system.
Thank you. Because when you look at the food, and that's my soapbox, is that, and you mentioned it, it's in the distribution, processing, and retail. It's their purchasing habits. When you can go to the grocery store, and my wife has to look to choose the locally grown blueberry, frozen blueberries, and get past the Chinese grown blueberries. There's a problem here, and that's, when you look at the poultry and dairy, it's supply managed, and there are some controls where your choices are very limited, where you have to buy locally grown, and that's what's kept that strong. But when it comes to the other commodities, we're losing out. And with talk down south of relooking at NAFTA, border controls, and you look at what's happened to some of our industries, the hog industry is pretty much gone because of you can get hogs cheaper elsewhere. There's a lot of things that just go without any protection. So there's that piece of it where a lot of people don't like supply management, but it also keeps production local, and it keeps our farmers they're economically viable. So there's a big piece of it where I think there's some trade deals and supply management and how do we keep production here. Because I know I was dealing with some vegetables growers out in Delta, beautiful tracts of land. They can hardly afford to put the fuel in the tractor to grow the vegetables because of the market is so low, so they stop growing it. And that's true. A bigger issue, I think, and it's great to have, and I think it's important. Everything is important to what we're looking at in self-sustaining, but we also have to look at the policies that our governments have and that our large retailers have in where they source their food. But I really appreciate what you've done. That's good information. Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I mean, every time I hear you speak on this, I just get 1,000 more questions. Just wanted to go, one of the things that you'd said when you did the first presentation to our Ag Advisory Committee was that this model is based on real data. You didn't make any hypothetical data up. This is using real, on-the-ground data. And it's the first of its kind?
It is. This is an unprecedented study. The integration of food production, resource utilization, environmental enhancement, and economic outcomes has never been done before. So, you can be assured that the data output is absolutely the best and the strongest available because everything was based on the very best data that is available in British Columbia and Canada.
Canada.
Absolutely.
Now, you mentioned if we brought more land in, we could actually double, or we could do 100% of what we're doing right now. But how much more land do we bring in? I mean, one of the problems we're facing is the continuous erosion of the ALR for commercial and industrial lands and residential land. So how much more hectares can we possibly bring in over the next 50 years?
So
40 years.
About 25,000 hectares is potentially available.
And what's that land doing right now? Is it just lying fallow?
It's pretty much. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And indeed, it's not an easy thing to do. It's going to be a regulatory proposition, which is beyond the scope of a research group like mine.
But if we could apply your model to the township, we could figure out how much land we have here that we need to try to bring in.
What the potential is and the economic potential, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, you talked about changing the types of things that we grow. What do we need to grow more of in this area? Do we have an idea yet?
We need to produce more of the breadth of fruits and vegetables that we consume that satisfy the average BC resident's diet. Absolutely. And so there's lots of things that we can be growing.
But the grains which
No,
the animals eat, we can't do that here.
Well, we could, but not if we want to optimize food self-reliance. And plus, it makes sense to import grain from those areas that are climatically suited for the production, strongly suited for it, the production of grains. And also it makes sense because grains are not perishable like fruits and vegetables and animal products are. They can be stored for long periods of time, and they're only 12% water. So shipping them is very cost effective, and whereas shipping animal protein and horticultural crops, fruits and vegetables is not.
So we could look then at making mutually beneficial partnerships with other bioregions in the province going forward.
And ultimately, that's the goal of the Institute is to do this modeling for every bioregion in the province and then figure out where the sensible relationships exist. For example, I think there's probably a sensible relationship between the grain producers and the caribou and the peace, and with horticulture and livestock.
Okay.
Animal
Now,
producers
you
here.
talked about the amount of money that just goes out of our province every year for food purchases from other places. If we were able to keep more of that money in our province, how many jobs could we create in the agri-industry?
We didn't calculate the exact number of jobs, but I can tell you we did a similar, less detailed study in the municipality of Surrey, and we calculated that if the 3,300 acres of underutilized ALR land in Surrey were brought into small-scale direct market production, it would create at a minimum of 1,200 full-time jobs, 1,200 to 1,600 full-time jobs, and generate at a minimum $70 million in net revenues a year.
And that was just for Surrey.
Just Surrey.
Wow. Okay. 1,200.
1,200 to 1,600 full-time equivalent jobs. You know, some of this these kinds of figures are not surprising to me. In Southwest BC, we spend $8.5 billion on food each and every year. The food industry is huge, and the vast majority of that $8.5 billion leaves our economy by the close of business every day.
How much is the vast majority?
90%, 95% would be my guess, my educated guess, because that's the system. The profit primarily goes to the corporate headquarters of Nestle, Monsanto, Safeway, Walmart, Cargill, Saputo. That's where the money goes. It's set up to go there. So the economic benefit of regionalizing a food system is in bringing that food economy, that huge economy, home. But it's not going to be easy, as Mayor Froh said. It's going to take some. It was regulation and policy that created this economic system, and it will be regulation and policy that creates a complementary system or an alternate system. Complementary, I think, is probably a better approach.
Now, the federal government last week, its new budget, has got a big emphasis on agri-food, the agri-food industry. In fact, it's one of the 6 sectors that they're focusing on going forward. That, if we knew more about what it was we need to produce and what the missing pieces in the supply chain are for us, we could probably get some federal monies then.
Good, and we could make a better case
Yeah.
for a different economic trajectory. Yeah.
Now, we also passed a resolution a couple of weeks back asking you to apply your model to Langley Township. Are you going to be able to do that for us?
Yes.
And
Yes.
what can we hope to get from that?
essentially the same thing that we generate for Southwest BC, focused on the Township of Langley. And I think most importantly focused on the food production potential to satisfy market demand here, levels of food self-reliance, of course, that would confer, and importantly the economic benefits of it. But I'd also like to add into this a more robust evaluation of what the post-production sector could look like.
Oh, that's
because
great.
that's how you're going to realize the economic potential. What kind of businesses need to be created at what scale, and how much
whether we
of it.
can get federal financing to help those sectors too. Yeah. Wow. Thank you very much. Very, very interesting study.
Thank you. Councilor Whitmarsh.
Thank you very much for coming today and providing this information. Just a couple of questions that I had, being that I'm not from the agricultural sector. So just a couple of things. One was you mentioned the 25,000 hectares. You talked about that sort of being the amount of land that would be to add into the system so that we could have, I think, up to 100% increase in the utilization of it. Is that 25,000 hectares, when you talk about that, is that land that's currently sitting in the ALR that's just not being utilized?
It is. We modeled only ALR land and a little bit of crown land, grazing land. But this study focuses on the ALR. And furthermore, that acreage that would be increased is all class 1 through 4 land. It's
right, okay.
Yeah.
Good, that's helpful. Thank you. On the environmental enhancements, I just had a question. I understood you to say that one of the reasons why the environmental enhancements causes a decrease in productivity is that we are taking some of the land out of the ALR to be used for, well, not out of the ALR, out of production to be used for wildlife and other types of things. Is there other things that happens with environmental enhancement that causes a reduction in productivity other than just simply taking land out of being used?
not in the enhancements that we modeled.
Okay, so
No.
all of your enhancements are based on taking land out, and that's the decrease in productivity is
correct.
for that reason.
Yeah.
Okay.
In
I
other
guess,
words, using some land for riparian buffers
right.
and using some land for hedgerows.
Rather than it being used currently for food growth, food productivity.
Rather than it being hypothetically used for food growing, yeah, in the future.
Okay, because maybe I read the stats wrong. I thought you mentioned somewhere that we'd have a decrease in food production if we were to use these environmental enhancements.
Yeah, so we calculated one level of food production without the environmental enhancements, and then we in the model impose these environmental enhancements, and it reduced the food production.
Okay,
slightly.
And then a third scenario was environmental enhancements with added land.
Added land, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so just
So we could actually expand food self-reliance beyond the 56% if we didn't impose the environmental enhancements, but we didn't model that.
right. Okay, so just sort of a question for response is this concept of food self-reliance, and maybe it comes a bit to this import and export. But what would be the challenge if say all of the land was being used for agriculture and we were using the ALR effectively for food growth, but our production mix wasn't quite right? It would seem that maybe we're growing too much of a certain kind of product, and therefore we have to export that product because we have too much of it. And because we're not growing other products, we have to import them. What would be the problem of that versus trying to have this balance of supplying all of our needs within our community? What is the challenge with that?
Well, to the extent that our crop mix doesn't meet regional demand, then imports are necessitated, and if that land is in production of crops that are products that are not needed, then that has to get sold someplace. So it really is just a question of the balance between growing crops to meet local demand versus growing crops to meet export.
Because it seems to me that the weather, the soil, other kinds of things would dictate that certain crops and certain types of agriculture is going to grow much better in this region. And as a result of that, we're probably going to have a surplus of those types of products. And then other products, as we mentioned, bananas and other things we can't grow. So I guess as long as, to me, all the land is being utilized, I'm not sure that we'd want to go down a regulatory path of telling people what they have to grow and what they can't grow.
Yeah, that's a fair enough point, Councillor Whitmarsh. I think that's not the intent of this study. The intent of this study is really to illustrate rather unequivocally the economic potential of encouraging the substantial development of agriculture and food system capacity to meet local demand. There's big money in it. There's big jobs in it. There's big business opportunities.
I think that was clear. That was helpful.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Hi, thank you very much for coming. I have some questions. They may be beyond the scope of what you intend to do with the empirical study that you're going to do, but it does occur to me in sort of extrapolating from what you're saying. So I'm wondering about your modeling. And so could this, for example, account for escalating and variable cost of certain things that are generally considered to be externalities, like gas and pesticides and even fertilizers and limitations such as water?
That is an excellent question. Our model did not take into account, it's not a dynamic model, it's a static model. So we did not model any changes in costs of production or any changes that represent the internalization of something that's currently externalized. So strictly a static model.
Okay. You were referring, I believe, to crops that are grown. I wondered if this included potentially things like aquaculture as part of agricultural production?
Our model did not. And in
But it
fact,
could.
we limited our study to terrestrial-based crop and stock production purposefully, just because of the inherent complexity of the project and not wanting to add another level of complexity.
Multi-layers come to mind when you think about all the
What's that?
the complexity of
Yeah.
all the different moving parts here that you're looking at. So I guess I have some questions about technological advances as well as climate change, so vertical farming, those kinds of things, and whether or not that could be factored into your analysis.
It certainly could be, and I have to say, as an agriculturist, I'm pretty much convinced that land-based agriculture is what's going to feed the world, and we will have technological advancements in agriculture without a doubt, but I believe it will be land-based farming systems that actually feed the world.
That's good, because when I hear about science fiction and eating algae and green goop, I'm not too inspired, actually. And just a final point, because what I'm gleaning from what you're saying is that once this information has been correlated and compiled, we need to then structure, the secondary step would be policies around how to achieve this. And I was just thinking of our Langley Sustainable Agriculture Foundation probably would be very interested in participating in that, and just, the township could take a leading role with our economic development partnering arrangements to figure out the way that we could best manage this information and make a framework of good policy around it.
And that's exactly how we would hope this information would find use. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Long.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It's terrific. I'm involved with the National Zero Waste Council, and of course the other side of this equation is the amount of food we waste. You said $8.9 billion comes out of just this region is spent on food. Estimates are 40% of that gets thrown away, which is doesn't doesn't bode well either, but I mean, you need both sides of the equation, producing food and using it more efficiently. So what are the next steps? Where can we help out? I noticed in your map that this study is basically coincides with the Lower Mainland Local Government Association, for example, as an area geographically that is represented by local government. So is one of your steps to reach out to more local governments? I know that we invited you here, but it's a story that can be told. And what are the steps? Is the province helping you? Is the ALC helping you? We talked a bit about the federal government from Councillor Richter, but I mean, what are your next steps and where can the township help to get this message out?
So the proposition of applying the model and advancing the model to the Township of Langley is very important to us. This is what we want to do is, and anytime you begin this kind of endeavor, there's a starting point, and then you continue to refine and get better and better. So we want to continue working with municipal governments or regional district governments, or a consortium of governments in a bioregion to apply this model and make it stronger and better. One of the things that we absolutely want to do is make this model user-friendly, and so it can be put on the internet, and any municipal planner and economic development staff could do their own what-if analysis. So that's the next step that we want to do. We are already in conversation with the Kootenai boundary bioregion, and they're very interested in applying this model there. We're also in discussion with the Okanagan bioregion, the 3 Okanagan regional districts, to apply the model there. And ultimately, as I said, we want to apply it to every bioregion in the province, and then understand what the appropriate dynamic should be between bioregions to optimize our ability in BC to feed ourselves and to create jobs and paychecks and steward the environment. Yeah.
And I guess
so working with the Township of Langley is a big step for us.
Climate change is going to be important too, because the growing season is changing as we speak, it appears. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. And people's eating habits have changed too. All of a sudden, everyone's eating kale because it's easier to grow, is it? Anyway, thanks for your presentation.
Thank you.
Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Dr. Molyneux, for coming. Could you just take a second and go back to a very beginning comment you mentioned, and just explain the difference between exploratory versus predictive methodology?
So in predictive methodology, you're suggesting what will happen, and we're not suggesting what will happen in our food system. We're looking at what might happen if these pieces were put together or supported, if other pieces were supported. So we're not saying that 56% food self-reliance will be achieved. We're saying that 56% food self-reliance could conceivably be achieved if these things were put in place.
Right, so it's somewhat of an interactive and a moving parts kind of.
Exactly.
Versus,
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it's more what if.
Okay, good. Now, 25,000 hectares more are potentially available for inclusion in agricultural production, not necessarily within the ALR. Those are outside, but could be included as.
No, those are in the ALR.
They are in the ALR.
That's ALR
so,
land.
For example, my acreage is not used for food production right now. It's included in that 25,000 hectares?
It is. Is
there land outside the ALR boundaries? Because that was a really a map exercise back in 1972, 73, where, people sat down, agriculturalists, environmentalists, and all those people, and drew a line on a map. Is there other lands that, I guess what I'm saying here, you mentioned a really, I think, a critical piece. Your long-term projection is to look at the dynamics between various different bioregions within this province to see how we can sustain agriculture and sustain our food source. Is there lands we should be looking at for inclusion in that discussion that are not presently defined as ALR lands?
Well, that's a very good question, Councillor Fox, and I don't have a good answer for that other than I bet there is. We have not looked at that. And in fact, in this study, we did not take A1 lands into consideration. So only ALR and Crown lands in the bioregion. Our understanding is there's not a lot of A1 land in the bioregion that would dramatically affect the outcomes of our model results. But is there good agriculture land outside the ALR? Absolutely.
Well, and I guess
And how much, I don't know.
Yeah, diversity of types of production might sway into that. And just my last comment, I mean, I think you mentioned a really significant point about the end goal of supermarkets and so on and so forth. The distribution piece is to line the pockets of Sobeys back east or whatever. I hope that one of the byproducts in the long term of your study would be interaction with yourself and others who involved in the study to look at discussing with the Ministry of Agriculture options for localized distribution. I know that there are restrictions based on percentage of product grown on the property. You can only do certain things in terms of distribution in relationship to that. If we brought the distribution system back to more localized, and I'm thinking of local markets on even things like Ralph's Market, which is an independent on Fraser Highway there. It's obviously lining the Ralph's pocket. I guess Ralph is the owner, I would assume.
Yeah, but Ralph's expanding. He's creating jobs.
I know. He's creating jobs, but it keeps that distribution localized. We look at localized marketing in season on many of our streets and so on and so forth. And so much of that is now restricted by provincial legislation, and I would hope that your long-term goal would be to try and encourage opening that up to a little more less regulated, localized autonomy for farmers to do that and create diversity.
That is a long-term goal. Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, we briefed the Ministry of Agriculture executive team on the outcomes of this project 3 weeks ago, and it caught their attention in no uncertain terms. And but you're quite right. This is the key. We've got to figure out how to. It's not just production. It's really how to all the post-production pieces of it to really realize the benefits. It's crucial, and I think it's important to acknowledge we all do what we do to line our pockets, and I do my work to earn a paycheck too. In addition to my dedication to this work. But there's nothing wrong with earning a living. The question is, where does all the money go and who does it benefit? And that's really all we're saying is there's increased opportunity for economic development in our communities by advancing a substantially more regionalized food system. There's just a lot of economic opportunity in it.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Qualley.
Thank you. Well, last time I heard you speak was about a year ago, and it was a completely different topic, and you never cease to stir up a million questions and lots of interest for me in this. But all of the points you've made here, Dr. Molinek, sort of come back to the other side of things. When you talk about converting 25,000 hectares to workable ag land here just in the region, that's 60,000 acres roughly of ag land that could be put into production. How do we incentivize people who own this land to actually make it workable? How do we do that? It's privately owned land. How do we incentivize them?
Well, it's a great question, and it's you know, it's well beyond my group's mandate to answer that question. That's we really see, and I don't mean to throw this back at you, but you're asking the $64,000 question, and we have this potential, we have this resource, we have this need. Now, how do those of you all that create policy, what do you make happen, and how do you make it happen? And you know, I have my ideas, but and I'm you know, I can share them, but I don't know how useful that ultimately would be.
Well, I think your ideas would be incredibly useful at some
Well,
point.
I don't know.
Maybe not in this discussion today, but
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. But I think the Sustainable Ag Foundation is working on answering some of those questions, or working on those questions. But if we put 60,000 acres into production, and just using the numbers you provided for Surrey, 3,300 underutilized acres in Surrey would equal 1,200 jobs. 60,000 acres in Langley, how many? I mean, that's thousands of jobs. Councillor Davis can't find 2 farmhands. So, I mean, that's thousands of jobs. Where do those people come from, and where do they live when they get here?
Well, that's again a super good question. It's and I don't mean to. Well, I am a professor, but I don't mean to be professing necessarily. This is the problematic. We in my lifetime. In my career of 40 years as an agriculture professor and agriculturist, I have seen the marginalization of agriculture. And I've seen us move from 25% of our population in North America being engaged in farming to 1.5% because of the economic marginalization of the sector. The question is this the future that we want? And I can tell you, I work with 50 young people every day who see a different future. We have a degree program focused on preparing people to be the builders and leaders of a different kind of food system. We run 2 farm schools. This year, our Tsawwassen Farm School's got 15 students in it who are betting their blood, sweat, and tears and hard-earned dollars that it's worth their while to engage in and help build a different kind of food system. I think, but what we have to do is understand the potential. That's my job, and then we've got to work together to figure out how to create an environment where these young people can do what they want to do.
And thank goodness for them for wanting to do that.
Thank goodness for them.
Thank goodness for them.
Because I know without food, none of this makes much difference.
I really see a lot of value here in the township around the jobs and work we can create in post-production. Not unlike softwood lumber, seeing our cranberries and blueberries leave the municipality every day to be juiced somewhere else or turned into something else. We could easily accommodate that within our industrial or light industrial section and encourage post-production of ag without removing land from the ALR. It would be part of our industrial or light industrial. But I think when we talk about where the money goes for, people like Sobeys, or, yes, they are lining their pockets, and you acknowledged we all have jobs to do that require us to earn a living so we can actually buy food, which is critically important to everybody here. But there is money that comes back to our local economy from those chain stores. Mm-hmm. There's truck drivers and distribution warehouses, and there's a lot of money back in our local economy. So I don't want to demonize those stores entirely. They are important to allowing us to access the food and keep food affordable for a lot of families who don't have the luxury of shopping at farm gate and farmers markets every week, or buying only organic for their 5 kids who have to pack lunches every day. So there's a lot of value, I think, in those stores, and
Absolutely.
It's a balance that really needs to be struck there. And, Ralph's Market, as valuable as they are to this community, they still sell strawberries in January that don't come from here, and a lot of other things that the public, I think, needs to be better aware of how their food is getting to them, and the accessibility to
Absolutely.
to that
I
food.
couldn't agree more. And I think it's important to make the point, it's not one or the other. It's striking the appropriate balance that benefits our communities as much as possible.
Thank you for your work, Dr.
Yeah,
Malinix. I
thank you.
appreciate it.
And now we're going to hear from a working farmer, Councillor Davis.
Well, I'm not working today. I'm just sitting here. Just a cute thing I heard not too long ago. Once in your life, you need a doctor. Once in your life, you need a lawyer. Once in your life, you need a minister. And 3 times a day, you need a farmer. Anyhow, boy, this is really stimulating to me. And I have so many questions. I'm thinking that we should go for, I should meet you sometime or be one of your students. It's unbelievably difficult when, like back in the 60s and the 50s, you know, you had mixed farming of what models you talk about. And the trends are that I just went to Calgary the other day. I stopped 4 or 5 in Calgary and met transplant dairy farmers from Langley. The models are going to big farming. It's really tough to get into little farming. And the thing I see, the Township of Langley, because we have small lots, this model would work better for that. But what you have to have is you have to have a market, you know. And I think that by studying this, just merely by studying this, stimulates an awful lot. Like, I mean, we talked about the processor. Gee, I'm always, you know, my grandfather was a processor, you know, because he was younger, right? We look at everything, but it's really tough when you have pieces of property that are tied up by speculators that maybe don't live in BC, or maybe don't even live in Canada, or maybe live in Alberta or whatever. That it's really tough to bring that into production. And especially, well, you probably heard Harold Steves talk, and one thing that I get out of, if you learn how to can, you can take the tree in front of your house and can your plums or whatever. So it's a totally different train of thought. It's political. It's everything. You have to, you have to consider that my son went out this year, and my cousin taught him how to can. And he brought 144 cans of jam home, and he did it like for $150 or something, you know. And it's food is something that we have to look at, because we don't want to get down 50 years down the road here and say, geez, you know, we're importing way too much food. We did the wrong thing. But you have to have the farmer first, and the market, and everything like that. Anyhow, I'm babbling on, but I'm really interested, and I think that keep pushing it, because it's an educational thing, and it's also, like I say, a political thing with land values so high that it's difficult sometimes.
We're going to have to fix that land value issue, or all of this is for naught.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the environmental enhancements and you had said you looked at the 3 of them. Now, why were they important to look at in this study?
Well, that's a very good question as well. We know that with the imposition of agriculture and the proposition of expanding agriculture, there is a diminution of the farmscape's value to wildlife and biodiversity. And one of the ways to prevent that impact from being so substantial is to impose riparian buffers and hedgerows. And both of those then allow for connectivity between major habitats, and so wildlife can find refuge and wildlife can move. But we also chose that because we had the data capacity to do it, and the technological capacity to do that. But they would be important enhancements to us. The nitrogen phosphorus balance also was a problem that we have here, and that's what we chose So we just chose those three. We also looked, though, at the ecological footprint and the carbon footprint and carbon stock, but I haven't mentioned that before.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about water? Did you look into water requirements at all?
Well, that's a super good question too, Counselor. We did not, because the data is not available. So the fact of the matter is, nobody knows how much water is used or available for agriculture in southwest BC. And when we go over to the Okanagan, we'll be able to do that because they know. But we don't know here.
So,
And it is a gap in the analysis. And we know it's a gap because we know that despite all appearances, water is the limiting factor for the expansion of agriculture in southwest British Columbia, without a doubt.
so how come Okanagan knows water and we don't here? Because they've kept track of it or they've measured
They
it?
have put the systems in place to track it and monitor it and regulate it,
Interesting.
and we have not.
We have not. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. There's no further questions. Thank you very much for your presentation and for answering all the questions so thoroughly. Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
that.
you, Mayor and Council. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Okay, so now we move on to reports to council, and first report is a delegation regarding the filming permits on 248th Street, and there's a motion to receive the report that's been provided. Do you have a motion, please? Councillor Arneson, second by Councillor Whitmarsh. And discussion, Councillor Richter.
Yes, and I'd like to add an amendment and refer to the Ag Advisory and Economic Enhancement Committee for their review and recommendations.
Certainly. Second by Councillor Davis. I'll just do a show of hands on the, unless there's discussion on the amendment. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. So now on to the main motion. Councillor Fox, as amended.
Yeah, the statement in here that caught my eye that really sort of seems to I guess be symptomatic of the issue is that the property in question that came with the delegation has been encouraged, and I can't find the exact wording in here right at this second, to come to the Township of Langley and register, I'm not sure the term register, but to acknowledge with the Township of Langley the scouting opportunities so that I guess greater communication with the Township of Langley related to how and when and where the opportunities for filming in this particular piece of property take place. And they haven't done that. They seem to, and I think one of the presenters said, I am a scout location person for movies. So what they've done here is gone out, and that individual has obviously promoted their property outside the context of the Township of Langley, and therefore kind of done an end around, I guess, for our policy, which I think to the largest degree possible has been quite successful. And I guess one of the things, and if we're referring it to the Ag and Economic Development Committee, maybe that's one of the things they can discuss, because I don't think we want to promote end arounds. I think we want to promote any and all filming companies to be good corporate citizens and to come and work through the system like every other one does. And so this report, as it stands, was very self-explanatory. It was well done. A question, I guess, that was a comment. Basically, fit within the rules and work within the rules, and maybe things will be better. On page 3 of 25, just after a little graph there about 839 248th Street, it says the residents of property nearby in the area, both of the above property and the complainant property are not supportive of filming in this area or within ALR lands. Now, what happens if the residents are renters? If you're renting a piece of property, does that give you the same opportunity to deny an economic opportunity to someone who owns the land next door? I guess that's my question. I'm not sure who can answer that.
Back again.
They are treated the same, Your Worship.
Thank you.
They are treated the same. So
They're in control of the property, I guess. Yeah.
they are in control of the property at the time the request goes through. Okay, I just wondered about that in terms of trying to, the owners, I don't know why the owners aren't resident, but that's a situation. I just, I thank staff for this. I think it kind of answers the questions that I have, but I sure hate to see filming be turned away. This is a very busy area, but certainly it's an economic driver in our community that we can't afford to lose filming in its overall perspective.
You, Councillor Long?
Your Worship, I just want to remind us of where we're at here, and I don't know why we'd be referring this report to our advisory committee. It's specifically a report based upon a delegation we received. We asked for some additional background information as in regards to the specific request we had from a delegation, and staff have done an excellent job of describing the background of that application, and they're doing their job. And I think this report gives council some comfort that our staff are doing what they're supposed to do. There's all kinds of other issues that can come out of the whole discussion. But I think we should just be receiving this report for information because it's information we asked for. But I would ask you, Your Worship, what would be the point of referring this specific report to advisory committee? Are they supposed to adjudicate on it again, or what? I don't think that that's appropriate. It was a vote taken very quickly. I think I'd like to register my opposition. I would caution council not to do that.
I may have assumed that it was just for their information. That's what I assumed.
Well, it's for everyone's information because it's in the package. But if we refer it specifically to them, Your Worship, we're asking for some kind of conclusion, and I don't think that's appropriate.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I didn't see any action on it, just referring it to them. That I didn't hear a request that they would provide any action. It was just, I thought, for information, like we refer, for example, agricultural land reserve or council land.
So can we have that as two separate recommendations? Receive the report and the referral so that we can vote appropriately when it comes to that?
Certainly. I went a little quickly because I thought it was one of those things that council, I can certainly reconsider that referral, and I can take it to the vote, and I'll treat it that way. So I'll reconsider the referral motion and bring it back to allow the discussion. So I've now opened up the discussion on the referral motion. So, yeah. So there was, if council had been unanimous in allowing that to go through to expedite the meeting, I thought we could just do it as a quick motion. However, there's been a concern raised by a member of council. So to respect that member of council's concern, I'm just reconsidering the amendment so that there can be discussion, then I can call the official vote. Mr. Backen.
Worship, just to follow up on something, the councillor is quite correct. There's sort of two components to this report. There's the specific issue as to the delegation, but the delegation also touched on something quite important, which was the implications of on filming. And there was a comment made that if there were a restricted number of days for filming in accordance with the policy that the ALC has put forth, which was something analogous to making it an event and 10 event days per year, it would have quite an impact on agriculture. And one of the things we've been following up on is we've tried to estimate then how much filming takes place in the ALR. And it appears that roughly half of our applications are for filming in the ALR. And for 2015 and 16 combined, there were actually 99 individual occurrences of filming in the ALR of 10 days or more. So over those 2-year period, that means then if we understand the ALC's direction that if it's going to be for filming of 10 or more days, that would mean we would have to generate about 99 non-farm use reports to council over the 2-year period. Now, the problem with that is quite often the filming location is not chosen until about 2 to 4 weeks prior to the actual filming itself. And that means we have to actually have the non-farm use before council and to the ALC for consideration prior to that occurring. And right now, the average time for both township and council for non-farm uses would be about 6 months. So effectively, those filming occurrences would be prevented from taking place. They would likely have to look at other alternatives. I'm presuming that it was that element of the discussion in the paper that was incomplete is what would be referred to the AAEEC.
Okay, thank you. Is that consistent with the mover on that amendment?
I have a point of order on this.
Okay, sure. You can have your point of order.
Okay, the point of order is it was a motion that was moved and seconded and passed. So at this stage, you can't withdraw it because one person objects to it. You can divide it and I think that's what the one person who is objecting is requesting, that it be divided. But you can't just withdraw it.
I didn't withdraw it. What it is, I brought it back for reconsideration under my authority under the community charter.
Why
mayor.
are we reconsidering it?
You're
Because
asking-
one person objects to it.
Well,
That's not democracy.
Councilor Richter, you asked for an explanation. I'm giving it to you. So under the community charter,
That's favoritism.
no, it's not. If you'd asked
Yes,
the same
it
thing, we're
is.
done. I'm sorry, not arguing with you. I'm replying to your point of order, and I'm giving an explanation. If you don't agree with my point of order, you do have the right.
I can challenge the
chair,
chair,
that
and
is
it'll get
the process.
defeated. Meanwhile, a perfectly logical request to send a report to a committee who has expertise in agriculture and economic development to review
Well, the
and
point of order's
forward
been
any
ruled on.
suggestions
Yeah.
to us that they may have about
The
it.
point of order has been ruled on. You may speak to the amendment if you wish, but it is back on the table. So unless I hear anything else.
But what you're bringing back on the table is the motion to reconsider to not do it.
Bringing back the motion, the amendment, to refer this to the agriculture or the.
Okay,
Economic
and now
Matters
I'm making a case why I think it should go to the Agriculture
Thank you.
Advisory
That is-
Committee.
That is so now you're speaking to the amendment. Thank you.
The amendment was moved, seconded, and passed.
I've reconsidered it. I brought it back on the table. The amendment's back on the table. So if you wish to speak to the amendment, it's back on the table for vote. So.
Procedurally speaking, can this be done?
Wasn't voted on.
I did call a
Yeah,
vote.
he called show of
and I brought
hands.
it back. So under the community charter, it can be done. So if you wish to.
The mayor does have powers to reconsider matters either at the present meeting or the subsequent meeting on a matter that was raised. And in this case, I understand the mayor is simply asking for reconsideration of the amending motion to refer to the AAEEC.
Right. That's all it is. So it is in the community charter. So if you wish to speak to it, I'm happy to.
Well,
speak
that's
to it.
what I was trying to do. And I'm just very confused about why our procedures now are so bizarre.
They're not
Like, why
bizarre.
wouldn't we have just divided the motion?
I'm not at that
Receive
point.
and
Councilor
refer.
Richter, I'm the mayor, and I made a ruling. You have the right to challenge that ruling under our procedure bylaw. You may speak to the motion if you wish. If not, then I'll move on to the next speaker.
No, I would like to speak
Thank you.
to
Then you have
the
the floor.
motion. Yes, thank you. The Ag Advisory Committee and Economic Enhancement Committee have a number of people on there, such as people involved with the Sustainable Agriculture Foundation. We have the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce, the new executive director of the Chamber of Commerce, who, by the way, has a very extensive background and knowledge with the film industry from the job she was in prior to becoming the new executive director. And there are issues that are raised in here. For example, staff are seeing an unprecedented level of policy enforcement by the ALC in this regard. Though staff's conversation with other municipalities, staff learned that such film-related enforcement by the ALC is not occurring to the best of their knowledge in their jurisdictions. So it kind of looks to me like there's been a big red flag pinned on the township, and I'm wondering why we have a big red flag on it. So my thought in referring this to the Ag Advisory and Economic Enhancement Committee is so that they could perhaps review this report, do a little research, and come up with some suggestions and recommendations for council to consider, because that is their job as an Ag Advisory Committee, as an advisory committee to council, and it's also our job as council to refer matters that pertain to their areas of expertise to them for their review and advice and recommendations for our consideration. So I'm basically doing what I think we should be doing within the context of our bylaw governing advisory committees.
Thank you. And Councillor Davis. It's on the amendment.
On the amendment to send it, I think it should go there. It's got a section here on attachment B, and that the ALC has got information on there that, this would give them something. What shall I say this? This would give them something, not something to review. It's not like information that we've already made a decision on, and they get to look at it for interest. This is something that they can read and actually put something together that, in their opinion, gives some advice to. So I totally support sending it to the ACL.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm really in support of sending it to the committee because I think that this is a new policy that's been implemented, and therefore it needs to have some clarification and consultation. I think that's a good role for the committee to analyze it and maybe take some time to consider it analogously. When I was on Tourism Langley, there was also a concern about the degree to which the policy was impacting a number of different farms that had wedding venues there. And it was deemed to be appropriate that we would send a letter expressing concern and saying that more than anything, it would be helpful if there was some further dialogue and discussion. I think that's how good policies are made, and that it is a back and forth. I don't think that this is specifically asking them to look at this one specific case, but more or less to look at it in terms of how it will be impacting our agricultural properties. And I think our job as policymakers is to balance the interests. And so I would be very happy to hear what people who have that area of expertise would say on the matter.
Councillor Long.
Oh, thank you. I wish I could have spoken first, because I think Council's missing completely the point I tried to make. First of all, it was not unanimous consent because it happened too quickly. That's why I wanted it to be reconsidered. This report is specific about filming on 248th Street. Is that all you want the Commission to look at, or our advisory committee? No, you want to look at the issue. As Mr. Buchanan says, there's two issues in this report. One is specific to the delegation, which has no business going to an advisory committee, because that's the way it's going to be dealt with those particular citizens and those particular landowners. The issue of filming on agricultural land is very important, so I think that part should be referred to, and I have no problem with the points that have been made by Council in that respect. But I don't think it's appropriate that you send specific information about a specific delegation, about a specific filming location to an advisory committee. So I think we can all win on this if we had just been a little bit slower on the gate here and said, well, we'll refer it. The issue of filming on agricultural land is definitely something that needs to be discussed by the committee and advice given to Council. So I'm happy to support that. Specific information to this property on 248th Street should be redacted from that report. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Councillor Qualley.
Thank you. I'm going to write this date down because I agree with Councillor Long completely. I think it is a bit confusing that the whole thing be sent to the committee. I think that if we're sending this to the committee, we should look at the whole ALC policy around use on ag land and what's actually considered and the impact it has in the entire township, not just in filming. So I would support a referral to them for their feedback on this because this is what is at hand and has the information from the staff report, but I don't think we should be, as Councillor Long said, including the information on that specific delegation from last meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Sparrow.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Qualley and Long. I think that the issue, the overlying issue, can certainly, I think, should be sent to the committee for their discussion and for their input. I think if they were to receive this as a delegation, the information, I think they would probably, maybe find that difficult to know what to do with, and they're not being asked to make a decision on this delegation. That's our role. So I think the overall issue is certainly something that I would support sending to them, but this specific application, I think, should not.
Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, it seems to me that we have a history of referring things to our commissions that come into council as a delegation. For example, the Ag Advisory Committee did a very successful task force on blueberry guns. And that whole issue of blueberry guns came to us from a delegation that came to council, and we referred the issue. My intent in referring this to the committee is indeed to look at the issue of filming on ag land, because filming is economic development, ag land is agricultural advisory. It's a perfect match for this committee. I can't think of any issue that would be a better match for this committee. So this, to me, is the start point of information that they would need to have in order to consider the issue of filming on ag land, which is what we really want to get their input and advice on. So I don't know. I think we're making mountains out of molehills here over words. If you defeat this, then I'm going to come back right away with refer the issue on farming on ag land to them for their input back to council. But I still think they need to have background information like what's in this report so that it can inform their discussions.
Thank you.
And this report is an open report anyway.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll call the question on the amendment. It's on the amendment.
Sorry, I pressed the wrong.
Oh, this is to reconsider?
No, this is on the amendment.
The amendment?
This is on the amendment that you've moved.
What's the amendment, sorry?
The amendment is to refer this to the economic. If you could
Refer to the AAEEC.
In its entirety.
Yep. That's what the amendment is. And the amendment carries with Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Qualley, Councillor Sparrow, Councillor Long opposed. Move on to the main motion. Councillor Davis is next.
What's that?
The main motion to receive as amended. I'm going through the speakers list that was left off. So you're the next one. Did you wish to
Oh, yeah. Okay, so we're back on
the main motion as amended?
Okay, one question that I had. It's in the executive summary. Applications are reviewed on an individual basis and in the contents of the area. Filming saturation imposes unfairly on areas, and as a consequence, staff deny film applications from time to time to reduce long-term risk of saturations. Is that what's the perimeter to that? How do they? Who makes the mind up there?
So the filming coordinator actually looks at the number of applications in the area, number of days filmed, and where the opposition is coming from. And it's more of a,
Only if opposition is coming from it?
No, it looks at all the factors. There could be an area that may have had a lot of filming, and then they would say, well, that's getting to be a bit excessive because that would then mean there's opposition could grow. But if there is opposition, it's certainly considered as part of the factors as well. And as was referenced in the delegation's concerns, there was two factors. The first factor was they had a neighbor who was very much opposed, and secondly, they were speaking of situations where they felt that they were denied the right to film, but in fact, it appears it was actually the filming company's decision not to film there for extraneous reasons because we had no knowledge of that particular application.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Richter?
My mic was just never turned off, I don't think.
Okay, no, you're just, if you don't wish to speak, you were on the speakers list, so, okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Carries the Councillor Long opposed. And so now we move on to F2. This is the 2017 Capital Improvement Committee Grants report. There are, and I counted down, 12 different points. Different ways we could do this. We could take the one motion all at once and then go through each one. And if there are any amendments, then we can go through each one. Councillor Long moves. Seconder is Councillor Fox. So we'll start with the first item, the 66,975. Anybody wish to speak to that? I've got two on. Okay, you move them all? Okay, it's all been seconded. Okay, so Councillor Fox, you want to speak to it? If there's anything you want to?
Yeah, I just had a couple quick questions, if I could. Let me find the right graph. And here, under the section grants general, The SASE Awards for Youth requested $2,500, but it's recommended they get $1,000. Now, the logo sponsorship category was recommended. So what staff has come up with and said is, okay, that's a category that's been requested by, or that has a dollar value attached to it. Oh, 15 to 22 on my iPad. And Mr. Tuomello and his box are arriving. Just please don't do an Oscar-winning get the wrong envelope stuff, okay?
Correct. I won't do
And before you answer the question, I want to thank you. You've obviously tuned this up exceptionally well, presented it exceptionally well. I remember very vividly last year when you had sort of just come into your acting role, and this was probably one of the first things on your agenda and plate. And I mean, you learned by trial and fire. Is that fair to say? And this year, I think you've done an excellent background policy. Here's what you've done your due diligence. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. Anyway, I just wanted some clarification on that one, and maybe you can provide it. And then there's one other.
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Fox. The Rotary Club requested $2,500. I examined all the categories with regard to their sponsorship and made the determination that as we do significant funding of youth in the community through the Community Grants Program, I chose the one category, which is logo sponsorship. Council may choose a different category of funding support. The next category up, I believe, is an award category of $1,800. I recommended the $1,000 because over $21,000 committed to youth through scholarships, as well as to a individual youth award through our community volunteer awards group. So this is why I came up with the $1,000 category. They did request $2,500.
Okay, I appreciate that explanation, and I understand. Thank you. The other one I had was community grant banners. The ABA and the Brookswood Merchant Association seem to be the only ones that are requesting money from that category. The recommendation is slightly different, and for ABA it's $6,000. For Brookswood Merchant Association, it's $7,500. Is there a rationale there?
Those were the amounts that they requested, as opposed to choosing to capture the whole thing. One group chose what their budget requirement was.
So, that wasn't, the request piece wasn't in there, so there was no comparative there. So thank you very much.
Those are the requested amounts, and those are the recommended amounts to be awarded based on their budgets for those banners.
And one last thing, in our annual budgeting process, we allocate the amount that is identified in here for each category. Is it the understanding, maybe through you to Mr. Backen or Mr. Tuomello, that where, for example, under Community Grants General, meet criteria, there's $66,000 recommended, which leaves a surplus of $70,755, but $16,500 is out of that. So if you took that, it would mean a surplus of around $53,000. Is that still available for us as council to potentially give further community grants under the general category at a later date rather than it coming out of council contingency?
There is, at the end of this motion, that the balance of the unspent funds be allocated to community-wide events initiatives such as Canada 150, Canada Day, and other high-profile tourism. So that's embedded in the motion. However, council has the authority to do what they wish with that money.
Okay.
So, and it would be available, I think, for future consideration. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richter?
Yes, I have two questions. The first is with regards to page 53. The grants Nothing Without Effort grant, and I see there's $5,000 set aside here for Brookswood, Aldergrove, Fort Langley, Murrayville, Walnut Grove, Willoughby, and rural. Now, are those just place markers, or have those communities actually come forward with events, or is it just to have the money there in case the communities come up with a project that they need help with?
Through your worship to Councillor Richter, there are groups that have made notice of applying for grants in those specific communities. One has a fully completed grant application up for staff review. So 3 out of the existing communities have expressed interest in the Nothing Without Effort program. It is there as a placeholder.
Okay. And then over then to page 52, I see there's 2 community associations, Brookswood Fernrich Community Association and the Fort Langley Community Association, who had applied for $2,500, and it says here the criteria were not met. I'm a little concerned about us not helping out community associations because they're very important to the people who live in the areas. And the Fort Langley, for example, it looks like they did some sort of a survey, and we're saying that that survey doesn't fit within the criteria for the 2,500. But those 2 groups, can they come forward under the Nothing Without Effort grant program then? Because they've both done, like Fort Langley has done a survey of what the people in Fort Langley want in terms of like sidewalks and road improvements. Brookswood, Fernrich, I think they've put up some sort of a Facebook or a blog site or something where people can connect with each other, which again is a benefit to the area residents. So would they be eligible? We're turning them down under the community grants, but could they then come back under the Nothing Without Effort grants?
The Nothing Without Effort grant program is a very intricate one, to say the least. It has a beautification component. It has partnering with other community organizations and a high volunteer component to it. They would have to develop an application which would meet those criteria.
Okay.
So it would be very difficult for them to
them
come
to
up
do that.
with it based on what they've applied for.
Okay. Is there any way we can revise the criteria under community grants to be more encompassing for these community associations?
That would be at the discretion of council. That is not a staff decision.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
So I could make an amendment then to get them included this year. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Qualley?
Thank you. Can you remind me, please, Mr. Tulamelo, where the funding is for the Christmas in Williams Park? Did that get moved to another?
The committee did not apply for funding this year.
Okay,
No,
that's
so-
why it's not appearing on here.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you. I thought it was missing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see no further discussion, so if no further discussion, Councillor Richter has something.
Yeah, I'd like to move an amendment partway down. That the 2017 community. Oh, that says banners. Where's the community grants then?
So that's the
I
first
want
one?
to put in. I want to put in an amendment to give those 2 community associations some money.
So you want to approve the request for $2,500 for the Fort Langley Community Association and the Brookswood Furniture Community Association?
Yeah, I'll make that
That's your
motion
amendment?
because we've got extra money in this account. So we do have the money there to give it to them, but maybe they should. So I do that, and then with a request to staff to review and revise community grant criteria to encompass community associations.
Was that part of the amendment?
Yeah.
So the amendment, I'll just make, before I ask for a seconder, I just want to make sure I'm clear. Okay, I'll just want to be sure we're clear in the amendment. If Madam Clerk could please read it back.
The amendment would read that the 2017 community grant application be approved for Brookswood Fernridge Community Association and the Fort Langley Community Association, and request that staff revise the community grant criteria to include community associations.
Thank you. Seconder is Councillor Arneson. So now I'm going to push the button.
Your Worship, just a point of clarification. I don't think it's to include community associations. It's to include the type of projects that community associations are submitting.
Yeah, because
Okay.
they're
enough.
submitting for projects.
There's no
aren't they?
objection. Well, that's the. Make sure we're clear on that. And I'll take a speaker's list on the amendment. So Councillor Long.
Thank you, Worship. Now, listen, we decided we weren't going to cherry pick, we weren't going to muck around with this, and here we are at it again. First of all, I'd like to know what page we're looking at, because we have two kinds of agendas, one electronic, one by page, and I don't know what page Councillor Richter's looking at, but I do see a lot of grants that have been declined because they haven't met the criteria which we spent 10 years trying to refine. Well, I guess it'll never really be perfect.
Found it, Rachel.
But I really think it's wrong, number one, to be picking on an association, say, okay, we'd like to make an exception for that one or that one. Otherwise, we're going to be here all night, and we probably may as well approve anything that comes through the door, which is totally counterproductive to what we've been working on for several years. So to start with, I am not going to support what I think I've heard, but Your Worship, can you please clarify what page we are looking at in the electronic agenda?
Table B2, page 18 to 20, Charlie?
Yeah, page 18 on the iPad.
Okay, that's the one that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, at least 7 no's on that page, because including a poor Christmas party we're not going to have for the kids in Aldergrove. So it's just the beginning of just turning the whole process upside down, Your Worship. That's what it seems to me. So I'm sorry I can't support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Qualley.
Thank you. I'm not going to support the recommendation because I'd like to support the applications that came in and met or didn't meet the criteria for this year. If Councillor Richter would like to propose we can change the criteria for next year, I'd be willing to look at that for next year. But this year, everybody applied under the same criteria, and we're not. I'm not interested in cherry picking. This is what was recommended based on the criteria that we put forward and advertised that everybody met or didn't meet. So I would be happy to support the report as staff put forward, and no amendments to that.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I won't support this amendment either. I think that cherry picking at this time is too late. We agreed last year we would not do this year, and I think we could develop a strategy and plans and change criteria for next year if we'd like. It even looks like the Fort Langley one, based on the description, they missed out on the application on all sorts of fronts. Couldn't get their application even done properly. So I don't think we should to provide that this year.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Well, I agree in principle with what you're saying. I'm just trying to figure out some way, though, that there might be an opportunity, even if we weren't supporting this, that we allow them to have the $2,500, both groups, that they could then subsequently reapply with the residual monies being available if they were to come up with something that was deemed to fit into the category of initiatives such as Canada 150 celebrations, Canada Day, and other high-profile destination events. So, in theory, they could potentially craft something and come forward and ask for those funds.
Just them or anyone?
Excuse me.
What's that?
It depends on all. It depends on what other criteria.
Well,
were
no,
listed.
not just them, everybody.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it says, that it would be entertained.
So I believe council always has that discretion. Mr. Tilmello.
You do have that discretion to choose how to spend the balance of the funds. If you wish to open it up to these organizations reconfiguring their proposed projects to fall within the existing criteria, you may do so.
And they still have to fall. They still would have to fall within the other criteria too. So,
but that would
without looking into it.
Yes, but that would also open it up to all other parties to resubmit and go through the process.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Sparrow.
Yeah, I'm not going to support this. It seems that we do this every year, and we try to have this not happen, and we worked really hard, and staff worked really hard on creating a criteria that we could stick to. And now, yet again, here we are picking favorites and picking, organizations that we're going to fund and say, no, we're not going to fund others. I don't agree with it. I think we have criteria. If they'd like to meet the criteria next year and reapply, great. But for us to sit here and debate this, and I could pick a couple favorites out of the list too, and we could start funding all of them, and then we'll just have a massive account that we fund these with, and have a bigger tax increase every year to fund more things. So I don't agree with it.
Thank you. I see no further discussion, so I'm going to call the question on F2.
That's
On the amendment. Sorry, on the amendment. Thank
the
you for
amendment to
to add those two. It's on the amendment. Thank you for that. And the amendment fails with Councillor Fox, Councillor Whitmarsh, Mayor Froese, Councillor Qualley, Councillor Sparrow, Councillor Davis, Councillor Long opposed. So we're back to the main motion, and there's still a speaker's list. Councillor Long on the main motion.
No, I'd been pushing for the other things.
Councillor Qualley on the main motion.
No,
okay, thank you. Seeing no further discussion on the main motion, I'll call the question. And it carries unanimously. So I move on to F3, and this is Agricultural Land Commission application number 100313. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Whitmarsh and seconder. Councillor Fox, discussion on F3. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Through you to staff, I just had a couple of questions regarding the application, if we know this information. So, in theory, both of these properties currently have their own well and septic system. Is that something that we're aware of, if that's the case?
Through your worship to Councillor Arneson, currently it's one lot, so yes, it would be serviced currently by well and septic.
But just one, not each one has their own. They'd have to duplicate what they currently have.
That's correct.
Okay. And I'm not sure if we know this either. I was just curious as to how long these two agricultural entities had coexisted on the same parcel of land.
Through your worship, Councillor Arneson, I don't have that information available.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on F3? Seeing none, I'll call the question. And carries with Councillor Richter, Councillor Arneson, Councillor Davis opposed. Move on to correspondence, G1, and there is a receipt and a request to consider raising the flag for the month of July. So if we could have both of those, Councillor Fox, Councillor Qualley, discussion, Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I'm just curious why we wouldn't do it for the whole year. Why just the month of July? And also why LEC is not included on this list.
Bracken.
Your Worship, the thought process was simply to deal with that 1 month, as that's the month of the birthday, if you will. And LEC is actually incorporated into those locations. The question we've been experiencing is, could we expand to other locations? And we could, with Council's direction. It's just that the events are being primarily held at the LEC or, in, shall we say, in the Willoughby area.
Okay, but I didn't get that on LEC. It's not on the list. There's Civic Facility, Museum, Ops Center, and McLeod Park.
Oh, I think that's for the difference between flags and banners. The LEC has a number of banners.
Banners.
Do they have a flagpole?
Oh, okay. So they're not going to have a flag. They're just going to have an electronic banner? But do they not have flagpoles at the LEC?
They have fabric banners.
Your Worship, I think the report, I don't have it open, but just a little bit below that says there's going to be a series. I think it's 30 banners. It's all the street banners that go up 200th and across 80th.
Oh, okay.
So I think the thought was the flagpole would just be duplication.
Okay. Well, if we're spending the money on these flags, why don't we use them for the whole year? I'd like to move an amendment that they be raised July 1st and stay in place until December 31st.
Seconder? I'll second that. Councillor Fox had his finger up first, so we'll grab him. Discussion on the amendment. Do we have enough room on the flagpoles? We have other flags that go up, don't we? Here and there.
We'd have to get rid of one flag. Generally, there's a complement of 3, so we'd have to actually replace one of the flags. Usually it's provincial, Canadian, and then the municipal.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Davis on the amendment.
What would be the
Okay, that was, I guess, my question. You can't tan them up, or that'll be a problem, won't it? I don't mind it's the year, so why not put them up for a year? But if you're going to have to take one down, okay, that's all. Thanks.
Councillor Long.
Well, I am the flag etiquette guy, so this poses an interesting challenge. Don't want to say no to flying a flag. I guess I should have written this report. No, or maybe somebody else on council should have. But anyway, this is the recommendations before us. Now, I suppose there is a way that you could fly. You don't want to take a flag down. So, because if you have 3 poles, you've got the township, the province, and Canadian flag. So, I don't think we want to take the township down. I don't think we can take any of them down. You might be able to fly 2 flags on 1 pole, but this is getting a little out of our jurisdiction and our expertise on this table here. So, I guess the concept is good. I think staff's going to have to come back on how they can do it, because they're going to have to take something down to put something up. Is a good question.
You have to do it for a month anyway. Why not just do it for a whole year?
For staff, I don't know, I'm not a flag expert, but can this flag be flown underneath the Canadian flag on the same pole? Because there are other organizations that come along want their flags flown here and there.
It's meant for the Canadian
rather than
flag.
take our flag down for a whole year. Do you know anything about that, Mr. Backen?
Well, it would be effectively, we think, to replace the anniversary flag. We have to replace the Canadian flag. That's like the.
So I guess we're okay with that?
We'll find out in a minute. Yeah. Okay. I see no further discussion on the amendment. Councilor Whitmarsh?
Is this amendment also referring to these 30 streetlight banners, or is it just the flags at the flags at these 4 locations?
Mr. Backen?
I understand the request to be for flags at the locations because we haven't discussed banners.
Okay. Thanks. Councilor Qualley?
Thank you. I'm happy with the rationale of this report. Bring down the Canadian flag for the month of July to celebrate the birthday. Raise the Canada 150 flag for the month of July, and then go back to being Canada after the 150 with the regular Canadian flag. So I'm not going to support the amendment.
Thank you. Councilor Richter?
Yeah, I remember, and I'm sure there are others at this table that remember when Canada turned 100 in 1967, and we celebrated the whole year. We sang songs, we ran flags up the poles, they had all kinds of events. I don't know, I'm just thinking that we should be celebrating for the whole year, not just for 1 month of the year.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to call a question on this amendment. On the amendment, yeah. Call a vote. What are we looking at? G1.
Yeah, remember that. We are Canadian.
And the amendment carries. Councilor Whitmarsh, Mayor Froese, Councilor Qualley, Councilor opposed. So we're back to the main motion as amended. And there's speakers list. Councilor Long, did you wish to speak to the main motion as amended?
Well, I wish we could have tabled that so I could do more research, but
too late.
Well, it could be reconsidered at some point, I suppose. I had a question about the street banners. I happen to know that there's a couple of communities in our township that wouldn't mind some of those street banners. Aldergrove would like to have maybe 6 of them. And I think maybe in front of the Fort Museum, the BC Farm Museum, where they're having their Canada Day celebrations. So can we make these banners available before they're purchased to, or if they already have been, I guess it's a moot point, to other organizations so they can maybe get in on a bulk purchase? Because I know that there are other communities, even though the report says that they didn't go to that, I think there are some that would want that.
So if directed, Your Worship, we could get an additional quantity of banners just to have in reserve and use in the locations that request them.
No, do we need a motion, or can staff?
Just because of the financial implications, probably a quick motion would be the best.
Okay, and we put some money aside out of the community grant, and I was going to actually say we don't have a budget specifically for the sesquicentennial, which maybe we could have had. Now we have some funds from the community grant, so maybe I would make a motion that a limited amount of banners be made available to community associations that request them.
And do we need a number on that, or can you source that out with them? Thank you.
For this amount, we're just looking for direction to actually get additional banners for other areas. The substantive issue is it's going beyond the original areas.
And I think that's terrific. It accomplishes everything that we've been talking about here.
Yeah. Excuse me. So do you wish to make that amendment?
Yes.
Okay,
so making a motion that they be available to community associations.
No, we haven't. So
it's an amendment.
Amendment to the main motion. Oh, is it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what he's asking for, another amendment. We had an amendment that's been voted on. Now we have another amendment. So Councillor Long has moved it.
Motion being that community associations that request banners that they be made available, a limited amount be made available to them.
That's fine. I need a seconder. Is there a second? Councillor Fox. Okay, so I'm going to open up the amendment. So who wishes to speak to that? I've opened up the amendment. Councillor Qualley.
Just for clarification, so we just awarded banner grants to the communities that have banners. So are you suggesting they purchase them from that banner grant money, or is this over and above? Because if they're going to hang for the year, as was just approved, then there's no need for the banner grant because this will offset the banner grant. So what's your recommendation? I just want to understand the
I'm
amendment.
not so sure as the rest of the community is going to vote the same way council just did about hanging them all year, quite frankly. I didn't hear that.
So maybe I would make an amendment to the amendment that we provide them and they can purchase them out of the banner grant allotment that they've been given. Because we've allotted the banner grants to the communities now. That's been done.
I think my motion was to provide them out of the sesquicentennial fund aside from the banners. My understanding from Aldergrove, for example, there hasn't been a lot of time to get an official response from the association there that's putting up banners, but they wouldn't mind flying some just during the July Canada Day celebrations. They wouldn't be up there all year.
So, Mr. Backen, do you have any, you shed any light on this? The banners, have they been ordered yet? Those banners, do we know if they've been ordered? Who's in the banner department here?
I believe they've actually submitted it, but I think there can always be additional banners obtained, so I'm not quite sure of the
Perhaps
total
I
order.
don't think it's a huge dollar value to order
it's
another
not.
dozen banners and make them available to some other communities. So I think that's...
May I make a further point?
Sure.
If you're going to fly a 150 banner at any time of the year, you do have to have it approved. And so this would be very beneficial because these are approved banners already. So I know that some people are suggesting making banners and so forth. This would solve that because they'll be approved ones and they can be purchased in bulk as we're already doing.
Thank you.
It's a small amount of money, but I think it's a great idea.
Thanks.
So I was trying to get some clarity on what the actual motion is. How many are you asking for? And
I said a limited number. I
think we left
Mr.
it up
Backen
to-
said a dozen or something.
I asked
Okay.
Mr. Backen to lift it up to the discussion staff to reach out and just find out.
Okay.
It's not that many, I don't think so. Okay. No further discussion on this amendment. I'll call the question. It carries with Councillor Richter opposed. So we're now back to the main motion as amended, and there's a speakers list still. Councillor Qualley, did you wish to speak?
No, thank you.
Councillor Arneson, do you still wish to speak? Okay, so I'm going to call the question on G1 as amended. It carries unanimously. And move on to minutes of committees. There's a Heritage Advisory, the Recreation Culture Parks, Seniors Advisory, and a Parcel Tax Roll. So we're going to receipt on all three. Councillor Long, second. Councillor Fox, discussion on receipt. Councillor Richter.
Yes, I just had a question with regards to the parcel tax roll panel committee meeting, that the minutes indicate that basically was a 6-minute meeting. But I'm wondering why we needed to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 township senior staff people at that meeting for 6 minutes.
Can answer partial. I'll ask Mr. Backen. As when I entered the meeting, I know I was there a bit before you, as we waited to get the meeting started. I did ask the question of staff, and it was indicated that because it was within the building, and there were some staff that were just wanted to be there to observe for training purposes and observation. So I didn't see any problem with it, and I know you came after and asked the same question. But Mr. Backen, if you could.
No, that's effectively correct, Your Worship. We had a couple things going on. We thought for the first time in many years there might be someone attending this parcel tax review meeting, and there wasn't. And as a consequence, the lead staff, if you will, brought along additional staff to actually try to train them or to give them a sense of what this was going to be like. And it didn't work simply because there was no one that actually spoke this year. So we continue to try to find ways to expose staff that aren't traditionally in these meetings to these situations so that they can take these meetings onto themselves.
Actually, there was a question, too, from the members of the panel, and so it was good to have staff there. Anything else? Okay, so with that, I'll call the question on receipt. That carries unanimously. And H2 is Senior Advisory Committee has a recommended motion. Can I have a motion? Councillor Fox, seconder. Councillor Qualley. Discussion on H2. Councillor Fox.
I just wanted to make reference to this under the minutes. It talks about the presentation that was given to us by one of our local firefighters, Jason Hodge, and Barb Stack, who's a member of the committee. This is an excellent, excellent, excellent program. That's Jason has spent a lot of personal time and personal money to put together in dovetailing with the MedWatch program. Just as we had today, the presentation by Dr. Mullenix. I think this presentation will be enlightening to my colleagues on council, hence the motion. And it's something that we may want to look at potentially providing some seed money for as it grows and expands. So I think you'll find it valuable. And I think you'll understand when you hear about it why it's valuable to the seniors in our community. And it's homegrown by one of our firefighters, and I think has potential to go, as Dr. Mullenix's presentation with his program and study, it has the potential to go across this province and even farther to support that. So I strongly hope that we will take the time to listen to this presentation.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Well, I'm strongly in support of this. I think it's really a great idea to have this positive and proactive approach. It's difficult enough when you have somebody entering the healthcare system without adequate amount of information or background. So I think it just is extremely helpful. It helps with the efficiencies. And I agree with Councillor Fox. It's probably something that we could support in modeling here and have it potentially go to UBCM as something that could be adopted throughout the provincial jurisdictions, because I think it would be very helpful to all of them.
You, Councillor Fox.
Can I ask a quick question of my colleagues on council? How many have either got a green dot themselves or a family member with a green dot? Okay, that's fine. That's exactly why we should hear it.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I'm going to call the question on H2.
Do you have to have a green dot to press the vote?
Yeah, well.
There's a green dot. There you go, now you have one.
Green square.
The green square.
And it all came up green. Unanimous. Is there any other business? Councillor Richter.
Yes, in the items distributed to council on Thursday last week, so March 23rd, I'd like to draw council's attention to items 13, 19, and 20. Item 13 is a letter from residents in Fort Langley on Billy Brown Road requesting that we review the parking or the lack of parking on Billy Brown Road. That what do they say here? Over the past few years, parking has grown into an issue. I'm asking that you please remove this traffic calming in this particular spot to free up parking. This type of traffic calming does not work in this street. What does work is having vehicles parked on both sides, as well as the hundreds of cyclists who use it for cycling. And they also want us to change the parking bylaw from 72 hours to 24 hours. So could we refer that one to staff? I'll make a, if I need a motion, I'll make a motion.
I think it's already gone down to engineering, hasn't it? It's already been gone down to engineering. So.
Yeah, okay.
And I could just comment, I lived down there. And
Copied on it.
it was interesting, a few years ago when that area was being developed, we were getting complaints that they needed traffic calming. So I quite like it down there. So I don't know what he's complaining about.
I had a question of clarification on item number 19, which is the EMBC call for proposals for the National Disaster Mitigation Program. And my question around this was, why is this coming to us? Are we supposed to apply for this, or are our staff going to put a request out for proposals? I just needed some clarification on it.
Your Worship, as I recall, this was a general solicitation they sent to a lot of organizations and members of council. I think it's probably done because in smaller communities there's not staff, but that matter has been referred to the chief, who's going to be processing it in the context of reviewing it and responding.
So can we apply to get money for flood mitigation through this program? Or?
I said the chief, I think it might be engineering, but if it's appropriate to our situation, yes, we would be doing so.
Okay. And the last item was, what did I do with it? 1920, I think it was. Where's my item 20? There it is. And this is climate change grants, and I'm just wondering if we're going to apply for any. Looks like there's $175,000 available through FCM.
Worship, again, same process. That when they come in, they're referred to staff to review, and if we think we qualify, we then proceed to apply.
Okay, thank you.
Any other business?
Termination.
Councillor Davis moves termination. Councillor Long seconds termination. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.